She is an activist, a writer, a trainer, and a researcher. Her specific areas of research have been on the marginalized and oppressed communities in India. She's also a prominent journalist and writes frequently on and she writes frequently on these issues as well. Just as an introduction, very quickly, on why this panel matters now and the key themes that are at play here is that identity politics in general has been criticized as a problem very recently, especially with the rise of what people call right-wing politics across the world. So one key limitation that internally people from identity politics have identified is that by virtue of a movement being placed in the context of an identity, one excludes other identities from that narrative. Which is why, for example, when one looks at Donald Trump's rise, the key response within the Democratic Party was that appeasing to cultural identities and gender and sexual identities was one of the significant reasons why white working class voters felt excluded and there was a backlash. Similarly, you see that dog whistle politics in India has focused critically on terms like minority appeasement, and the response to that has been creating a larger identity that somehow subsumes these identities. So the response has often been on terms that are generic, such as Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, or terms that refer to a generic identity instead of marginalized movements, which is the reason why you have identity politics in the first place. The second critique has been a little more internal, and I think this panel would focus on that as well, is that identity politics essentialize to a great extent what an identity means. And by virtue of that, some people, for example, women within a marginalized community may feel excluded because a black identity or a Muslim identity may not account for the oppression that black women or Muslim women or black transgender individuals or Muslim transgender individuals feel within that community. With this, I'd like to begin the conversation. We'll have an initial time given to both panelists to set out their thesis, so to say, and then we can take questions and go forward. Would you like to start?
The understanding I have about today's talk, and even before I start explaining anything, I will need the freedom. I will take the freedom and will ask you for the freedom to speak both in Hindi and English, because I have some of my transgender friends here and they may not be able to fully understand English. आज के दौर में the theme that was given to me is modern identities and emancipatory movements and their limitations, their limits. And I identify, I locate myself as a transgender person, as a transgender woman, so I'll primarily be talking about gender identity and the narrative of the trans movement in India. How much time do I have? 20 minutes. So the trans experience and the trans, if the world to us appears very binary, and in India, incidentally, and for various reasons, the transgender community in India is not a unitarian identity. That's quite the case also with women and with people with disabilities and many other marginalized and disenfranchised identities. We are there is a diversity within us. We have the Haveli Hijra system, which is quite Islamic. And we also have other identities as Kinnar, Mangalmukhi, Shiv Shakti, which are Hindu, and many other identities. So I don't know which of these I should call modern, but in India, we've had some level of acceptance of trans identities. I won't say much, but there's some level of acceptance, because in the north, if you see, people offer alms, and Hijra and Kinnur communities are called when there are weddings and cradle ceremonies and engagements and so on. So there is some level of socio-cultural, socio-religious acceptance, but that's only limited to these occasions. People are not comfortable seeing transgender people as one amongst you. People are not comfortable seeing transgender people working at places of work, at places of employment, and that the evidence of which is the fact that not only in India but across the world, सारे दुनिया में सिर्फ दो रहने के जरिए हैं, एक है भीख मांगना और दूसरा है जिस्म फरोशी का धंधा. One being begging and the other being sex work. They are only two sources of livelihood. The few transgender people who've tried to access education and have access to education, and the very few transgender people who are in jobs, which is a very small number, which is a minuscule minority, do not access it as transgender people. And to explain this, I will just briefly talk about what is, most of you would perhaps know, that gender, which until now has been looked at in a very binary way, as just male and female, thanks to the very historic and watershed Supreme Court judgment of NALSAR versus Union of India, is no longer binary. The Supreme Court called it the third sex. Now, we're very happy with that judgment at many levels, but we also want to ask, if we're the third sex, who the hell is the first? Who on earth is the first gender? Because I don't think there's any such ordination or ordinality of first, second and third. But we are transgender, and we need to acknowledge the fact that gender is not binary. It's a continuum, it's a spectrum. And there are multiple locations between the endpoints of this continuum, between the endpoints of the spectrum. After the Supreme Court judgment, the assertion has changed a little more. The NGO movement of 25 years has mostly, within the LGBT community, has just focused on what HIV prevention and disposal of condoms, which is necessary, but it's just been limited to that at many levels. It's just HIV prevention. And it was primarily headed by a bunch of men, privileged, dominant caste, dominant class men, who incidentally are cisgender gay men. So most of these positions of power were held by dominant caste, dominant class, cisgender, and many of them NRIs. And the narrative has been such that they partook and participate in something called politics of behalfism. So I know better than you, and transgender people can be on the board, but we as a bunch of gay men will decide on your behalf. I'm not saying all our gay brothers and sisters have done this, but some of them have. And that has significantly changed with the NALSAR judgment, and even before that, because NALSAR judgment just didn't fall out of the skies, right? There was a lot of grassroots movement, advocacy, activism that led to it. So So now you have quite a few trans NGOs run by transgender people, like Kinder Mal in Bombay, like MARG, Multiple Action Resource Group in Delhi. Lakshmi Tripathi has come in a very big way, although I don't quite see eye to eye with anything that she does, or many things that I don't see eye to eye with. But I'm happy that trans women are asserting themselves. I'm also not as happy to see, behold, that our trans men are not able to assert themselves as much. And transgender is an umbrella term, right? So within which we have male to female transition people, and female to male transition people as well. So what we as trans women have suffered, the invisibilization, the silencing the voices we've suffered, at some level I think we are also indulging in that by indulging in some politics of behalfism where trans women speak on behalf of trans men, which shouldn't be quite the case, at least going ahead. So these the emancipatory movements here from space in history 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where just a bunch of privileged gay men spoke on behalf of the entire LGBT community. It has changed now to queer women, lesbian women, bisexual women asserting themselves. So you have Labia, which is the lesbians and bisexuals in action, which is primarily a group of queer women. You have Lesbit, we have many other queer organizations run by women, queer women, and transgender women. So voices, diverse voices are slowly and gradually coming to the fore, but the change is very slow and painstakingly slow. The NALSAR judgment was historic because it, for various reasons, because it debunked the myth debunked these myths that conflate gender with biological sex. It said these are two different things. It also said that reposed that power to identify as transgender with just the individual. It said that nobody, these are not the words of the judgment, but it said in the summary, if you see that the right of transgender people to self-identify their gender is upheld, and the central and state governments are thus directed to recognize the self-identification of transgender people. So it took away, and it said no parent, no doctor, no professor, no school, no university, no state, no government shall decide if Vyjayanti Mogli is transgender, or if any one of you here is transgender, and that you and you alone, the individual, will be the epicenter of that authority. The autonomy and the prerogative of determining gender identity should rest with the individual, is what the NALSAR judgment said. It also went ahead to say that any insistence on sexual reassignment surgery or hormone replacement therapy or any medical surgical procedure is both immoral and illegal. And this was landmark. Thus the Supreme Court said that what lies between the thighs, whether that's a lump of flesh or an orifice, cannot and shall not determine a person's gender. A person's gender is how the person identifies himself or herself, and once the society will identify him, her, or them. I'm just using 3 pronouns, but there are a multitude of pronouns. So it retained that power, it reposed that power in the individual. Thereafter, we had Teja Shiva, the MP who got the Rights of Transgender Persons Bill 2014 passed unanimously in the Rajya Sabha. Even the Indian government passed it in the Rajya Sabha then, 2 years ago. But the Transgender Persons Protection Rights Bill 2016, to say the least, is draconian. What Supreme Court gave, the Transgender Persons Protection Right Bill tries hard to take away in 3 to 4 different ways. There are many ways in which it tries to do that, but I'll just, for the paucity of time and because I have time, in 3 to 4 different, how much more time do I have? 10 minutes. So it tries to take that away. It creates a monstrosity of a district screening committee. District screening committee that says it will be headed by a chief medical officer, a doctor, from a government hospital. Here we are, where women find rape survivors among women, cisgender, genetically, biologically born women find it so hard to access Medicare after rape and after sexual violence in ways that uphold their dignity. And here we are, our medical system hasn't even understood the gender binary well. And here we are trusting our doctors that they will understand beyond the gender binary without any training, without any public investment in it. Firstly, there is no locus standi for doctors there, because if a person believes that a person is transgender, then the person is transgender with or without surgery. So this provision of a district screening committee is a monstrosity. And even before that, it defines transgender people as either male and female, or A, either male and female, or B, neither male nor female, or C, partly male and partly female, and gender dysphoric. So what it's trying to do with the bill is it's conflating transgender with intersex. Now, who are intersex people and who are transgender people? Intersex people are those who are born with bodies that are neither male nor female. Very basically put, very crudely put. So they could be, as I said, they could be both male and female genitalia that are visible, neither or partly formed. But these are just three possibilities. There are many other permutations and combinations. So the bill, instead of addressing, say, 1 crore transgender people, because you look at the study of Professor Gary Gates of the University of California, a professor of law and public policy, he came up with a study that 1 to 1.5% of people in any society, in any given society, could be transgender. Now, we are trailing at 1.4 billion. So 1% of that, like taking the low range, 1% of that is how much? 140 crores, 1.4 crores. We'll go down further, 1 crore, misal ke taur pe. So this bill has to be written for 1 crore people, and instead it's at the definition stage, it is done gatekeeping so that it filters 98% out of transgender people out of the very definition of transgender and just conflates transgender with intersex. Intersex people could be transgender people if they so identify, and they are, if they so, and we respect that, but it's just not about only intersex people. It's about people with any biology, any anatomy, who self-identify as transgender. So look at, law often intersects with economics and public expenditure, right? So perhaps this is one way in which they want to dangle a pseudo-progressive bill and say, we are here defending your rights, but people who will benefit out of it are not 1 crore transgender people, but perhaps just 5% of that, and that keeps 95% of transgender people out of the very definition of transgender. The 2011 census says that we have 5 lakhs, but that's highly wrong. It's totally wrong. Because many of us, after surgery, will not tell the society that we are transgender. We will just identify as women, and the NALSAR judgment gives us the authority to do that. We may identify as women or as transgender. So when the census enumerator comes and asks us for our identity, I will just say I'm a woman. So we get subsumed under women. So this 5 lakhs should typically be into 20, which is say 1 crore. And 2 other reasons for the monstrosities. It says, whosoever entices a transgender person to beg. The Hijra system, which is socio-cultural and socio-religious, pushed to the fringes as we are of society. We don't see us in mainstream employment. You don't see us in employment. You barely see us in employment. We formed our own communes which are very matrilineal, where we have Amma, Nani, Dadi, whoever. And we seek alms and we live off alms. So the Amma, Nani, Dadi who tells us to seek alms can be will be the person who's enticed us to beg and can be sent to jail for up to 2 years. So this is a way to decimate our matrilineal Hijra system. And the last reason, which is not actually the last, but for the paucity of time. It says, if a transgender person should not be thrown out of home. I've forgotten the section clause and all that. But if a transgender people should not be thrown out of their homes by their parents. But if a transgender person is thrown out of their home by their parents or families, under the orders of a competent court, the transgender person should be sent to a, what is it called? A remand home. or a rehabilitation center. We know how horrible these remand homes and rehabilitation centers are. They are just, most of them, I won't say all, but most of them are state-owned, state-run brothels of trafficking, where the police will sell their bodies and the police will use their bodies. So, and these are the reasons why, despite a transgender community struggling hard in the adversity in which we are, and we've almost wrestled a NALSAR judgment out of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has delivered a fairly good NALSAR judgment, and the bill tries to subvert most of it. So I don't know how emancipation will happen if in the name of emancipation, if in the name, and it calls protection, transgender persons protection rights bill 2016. We don't wish to be protected, like how many of you women will say that we don't need to be protected, we will protect ourselves. You just give us what is rightfully ours. On that note, I will close it for now and hand it over back to the moderator.
Thank you, Vyjayanti. I think one theme that we could bring out from your initial discussion is this tension between your identity being rooted in the oppression that was based on your identity and a response to it being emancipation itself. But a major chunk of conversation opposing the identifying limitations of such movements has been that why don't you use universal terms and use liberal language. On the internet, a bad place to cite the internet, but a major chunk of conversation on the internet on, say, feminism has been, a response from men has been that why isn't it that you term it as equalism, or that, why would you want an identity-based movement to emancipate? Similarly, you've had language in even the gay liberation movement in the United States that said that the moment we achieve emancipation on the basis of identity, we do not require an identity-based movement anymore. So just identifying this as a theme for future reference now. Ms. Sheeba Fehmi.
Thank you, Aymen, and thank you, Vyjayanti. It was a very incredibly insightful deliberation. Thanks a lot for that, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, attending since last 2 days, all the panels. Thanks to Professor Siddharth, Pallavi, Namrata, Ashna, and other members of the organizing committee for deciding to have me here. And also thanks to Kanu and Sarah for looking after us so well. Now I'm going to introduce a particular aspect regarding social movement, and it's about the absence of social movement in India. I'm going to talk about the absence of protest movement or social movement among Muslim women in India, and particularly after the Shahbanu case happened. And it is quite surprising that in spite of like many aspiratory movements that we have witnessed, not only post independence but before that also, like I would say in 19th and 20th centuries in India and many other colonized parts of the world are characterized by social and political movements for self-rule and liberation. Not only were political aspirations in conflict with the oppressing colonial powers, but the oppressed within the indigenous communities were also striving to gain freedom and from dogmatic and retrogressive practices and cultural values and social values of the past many centuries. So sundry progressive social movements, including feminist movements at various levels, mark the 20th century India. Against this backdrop, it is conspicuous that there has not been a single such movement among Muslim women that merits mention. And at a time, I just wanted to, at a time when almost every social group or category was setting the agenda for its emancipation and development in the new socio-political arena, Muslim women, who obviously constitute a socially vulnerable and oppressed category, did not show any sign of awakening about their misery due to their subservient position within their own community. I mean, barring few literary examples, writings from creative writers, particularly like Rashid Jahan, Ruqayya Sakhawat Hussain, and Ismat Chughtai. We hardly have anybody, setting the agenda for the emancipatory discourse within the community. So even today in post-structure discourse, when Muslim leadership, and when I say Muslim leadership, I mean you can say Muslim male leadership, are demanding affirmative action for their own uplift and an equity-based approach in the political arena. Besides other measures to improve their material, political and social conditions, the voices of half of the Muslim population is not that way organized, or not setting the agenda, or not asking their share of the pie within the manifestos, election manifestos and so on. So that is to say, while Muslim men stake their claims in the public arena using the human rights framework and liberal democratic framework as they do so, Muslim women are focusing on domestic issues, which reflects the stark fact that suppression within the family has a process of self-realization and development. Therefore, the dreaded fear of divorce is further magnified by the reality of women being uneducated, unskilled, and ultimately facing destitution. So we see that in different parts of the Muslim world also, like in Iran, in Egypt, and in various other parts of Muslim world, Muslim women are setting a very different kind of agenda for themselves. But Muslim women in India, even Pakistan is doing far better. But Muslim women in India somehow are still, worried about their destitution after divorce. They are talking about the repercussions of polygamy on them and their kids. So we need to understand what has led to this situation within the community. So besides facing discrimination as a member of minority community in public arena, the subject of domestic violence, various prohibitions in the name of religious injunctions that hamper the realization of individual self, denial of freedoms and civil liberties in the name of preserving cultural identity of the community, etc. These are the issues that are effective stumbling blocks in the progress of Indian Muslim women. So this category needs a very different kind of treatment in the academia as well as in the realm of activism, both. The situation is particularly acute in North Indian states of UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, etc., where the stronghold of patriarchy mixed with the feudal characteristics have presented very strict customs and traditions. How much time is left? Okay. Another complexity that is related with the issue is that the Indian civil society and judiciary has conjoined this with the issue of uniform civil code. So the debate of Muslim women rights has an umbilical relationship with the issue of uniform civil code as mentioned in the directive principle of the state policy in Article 44. Likewise, periodical and often badly timed pronouncements by the Supreme Court and lower courts also urging the state to enact a uniform civil code has received wide media publicity. The myriad opinions expressed in support of the UCC are governed by three distinct undertones, that is gender, equality and national integration. So, and the concept of modernity also that is embedded into this middle class morality of modern society. So the gender concerns project the demand for an all-encompassing uniform civil code as a magic wand which will ameliorate the woes and all the sufferings of Indian Muslim women and Indian women per se in general, and it will bring some great relief to religious minorities in particular. So this concern places gender as a neutral terrain, distance from contemporary political processes. From this point of view, the agency for change within communities becomes highly suspect. Minority women are projected as lacking a voice and as an agency either in their own communities or through the process of litigation to claim their rights within existing structures or to bring in changes which are egalitarian and gender just. Moreover, this also suffocates the chances of minority women ever coming on their own terms. So it gives the state a monopoly in the project of emancipation and modernity and the exercise of agency. Thus, it projects a state intervention in the form of an enactment of a uniform code as the only option to bestow gender justice upon minority women, labeling their religion as unjust and gender insensitive. this further infuriates the religious leadership, who then reject state intervention to refute the change. Actually, we have been, saying this, all the activists who are working in these areas, that the moment you conjoin the two issues, the meanings of triple talaq and uniform civil code together, you actually give a very, good chance of status continuation of status quo by the clergy. And they have been, thinking, they have been presenting this whole discourse like this only, that government of India or the Indian nation state wants to intervene in the Muslim personal law. They want to, do away with Sharia law and just want to have uniform civil code, and Muslim women have become, they are hobnobbing their hands and glove in that project of nation state, liberal nation state. So this is something which we have been asking nation state governments and the middle class intelligentsia, urban intelligentsia, not to club the two issues together, because it only harm the movement. It never supports the movement. At another level, for the liberal modern English educated middle class, the demand is loaded with a moral undertone of abolishing polygamy and other barbaric customs of the minorities and extending to them the egalitarian code of the enlightened majority. So the impression is that it is only among Muslims that polygamy is being practiced, and the family laws are quite barbaric, and the myth is that the majoritarian community is governed by the secular laws, and it is only the minorities that are enjoying these special provisions through personal laws. Whereas we all know, I need not tell you, you are the students of law, that all the religious communities, including majority community, enjoy their own personal laws in India. So there is no difference on that count. This position relies upon the Western model of nation-state and liberal democracy, and ensconces simultaneous sexual relationships in the nature of polygamous marriages in the name of modernity, but at the same time endorses sequential plurality of sexual relationships, and also the more recent trends of informal cohabitations, which have gained legitimacy in the West as well as in our country and many other parts of the world. So within a communally vitiated political climate, the demand also versus concerns of national integration and communal harmony, and projects Muslims as the other, both of Hindus and the nation. So at times the distinction between the two terms collapses and they become interchangeable. So because of all these things that are going on the sidelines, and along with the mainstream debate of Muslim women within the Muslim community of polygamy and triple talaq, because of this reason, it has become overloaded with so many sensitivities and legal provisions that it has become really difficult. Of late, we have started saying that, okay, bring the first code, draft the first code of uniform civil code, so that at least we have a look at what is it going to be. I mean, how can we support or oppose anything that we haven't seen even? So it is better to have a first draft, let the nation debate the issue, and then think. Then everyone has to come up and see whether we like it or not. So. On account of uniform civil code, I think it is better to ask the government, because it is Parliament's job to draft, to create the first draft, and then start the debate, instead of not having any draft and keep using it as a whip to deal with Muslim clergy. So this is one thing that is one very important aspect of this debate. Is another thing is that the political parties themselves are they are not at all democratic and gender sensitive in themselves. As far as the role of all these political formulations goes, the Shahbano, Gudiya, Imrana, Rani and Rahim B cases, the classic example of how the fear of losing votes of a particular community prevents governments from making judicious decisions. In the first case, actually, governments ultimately belongs to political parties, and they think that it is easier for them to deal with the Muslim male head of the family, and just they can ensure the support from the whole family. So in the first case, the all-powerful Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's government cowed before obscurantist forces. In the second case, the obduracy of the first husband who went missing for years. Like I'm talking about this Rahim B versus Daddu Pathan case of Aurangabad, the bench of Maharashtra High Court. So in this case, the first husband who went missing for years, and then he returns, and when the wife and the daughters take him to the court for the alimony and for all other, issues involved, not only alimony but other things as well. So he said that he has already divorced the wife long back, like 8 years back. So the court said, okay, now the Muslim men have to register their divorces as well. And Muslim Personal Law Board came to his rescue, saying that it is a mudakhalat, it is intervention in Muslim personal law, and which is Sharia law, and we will not tolerate this. So everything is intermingled, and there is no clarity whether Sharia law is Muslim personal law as well, and whether Muslim personal law and Sharia law, these two terms can be used interchangeably. And because of this reason, we have seen lot of confusion that is taking place within the the debate that is going on national television and otherwise. So Muslim women have been for codification of Muslim personal law. It is a very simple mechanism. Codification means that you, just the way Hindu code will, you just standardize the process of divorce and nikah and divorce, so that a nikah can be established undisputably, a divorce can be established undisputably, and rest of the matters involving the divorce, alimony and all other things can be taken care of the law that is already existing. For this very small debate, for demand, there is this huge debate on national television, and a group has also written a letter to the Prime Minister of India, and Prime Minister office has returned it back to the Supreme Court, and again Supreme Court has went back to All India Muslim Personal Law Board, who is instrumental in depriving Muslim women their religious as well as constitutional rights. So we are just going round and round and not reaching anywhere in this case. I think this is all I wanted to say, and then I just want to ask one question, that why is it that we don't, Muslim women in India is equivalent to the Muslim women in Bangladesh or Pakistan. I mean, we are from the same flock, but in size also we are almost like equal. But they have, like Pakistan and Bangladesh have produced their own, Kishwar Nahid and Zahida Hina and Benazir Bhutto and Wajida Tabassum and Asma Jahangir and all these people. Where are our Benazir Bhutto and Asma Jahangir and Fehmi Riyaz and all these people? Why is it that Muslim women are lagging behind within the subcontinent? So we have to understand that this minorityism that has crept into the psyche of the community, that we are under siege, and we have to deal with the external enemy and all the problems that are there inside, and can be taken up later, and the minorities within minorities can wait, and what else? That it is always like projected as a clan versus constitution also. So making it further difficult that constitutional guarantees versus the responsibility of taking further the cultural burden is singularly on the women. So these are the questions that Muslim women are dealing with, and in spite of all these things, there is no concerted movement within the community, or maybe even within the parts of the community, whether it's south or north or east or west, whereas the presence of Muslim women is everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was very insightful. I think one theme that I could identify from both your interventions was this constant need to place identity politics in the context of minorities within minorities, or identities that have been subsumed by a dominant discourse. For example, you raised the whole issue of minoritism, and similarly you identified on, the politics of behalfism as an extremely difficult problem. The response to both of them over the years has been, you prioritize in identity politics, you prioritize what emancipation means itself. So in the case of what Sheeba ma'am calls minoritism, the response has always been safeguarding symbols of Muslim identity in India, and similarly for what is called the LGBT movement in India, you've identified these symbols as Section 377, for example, and privileged people of the community have identified marriage equality as a goal. And similarly, you have issues, especially among Muslims in the northern part of the country, where safeguarding Urdu and safeguarding personal law take priority over how their women are treated at home and in public life. So if both of you could respond to this in a little more detail, that would be helpful.
Thank you. And I must thank you. It's been so insightful, your talk. I've written some notes down. Coming to the points that you raised, yes, as politics of behalfism that I denounced, the oft-cited reasons for this are that, transgender people won't be able to speak for themselves. And we as a bunch of elite middle-class people will be able to understand, analyze it better, but it has to start somewhere. Also, what was the other point that you spoke of? Yeah. Also, within the, I don't like to call it LGBT. I don't like to call it LGBT family, because I don't know if it's a family, I'd rather call it LGBT groups. I think the sense of oneness, or if not oneness, the proximity is closer to the queer women groups and the transgender groups, but it's barely there, because I've known many cis, gay, dominant caste, and I don't mind you, I'm not saying all gay or bisexual men are this. I'm not doing any homophobic male bashing here. But I have known enough and more cis, gay, dominant caste, dominant class men who say that transgender people are the cause for their oppression, because they say भी आप लोग ऐसे ताली बजाते हो तो इसलिए हमें भी लोग हिजरा समझते हैं. आप ये क्यों नहीं समझते हो कि ये ताली जो बजाना है हिजरा लोगों का, this is a way of protection, because hijra people do not want to beat or thrash people. And if you notice, hijra and transgender people who clap their hands, and they do that when they're aggressive, and they raise their voices and shout, and may shout as slow expletives. But that's their way of protecting themselves, because it's a conscious choice made to not be physically violent or to do anything illegal, because bajawing the tali is not illegal, no? Is it illegal? It's not. So there is a lot of internalized transphobia within the LGBT groups, and there's a lot of, sorry to say this, but there's a lot of internalized hijraphobia within the transgender groups. We have transgender educated people who will say, I'm transgender, but mind you, I'm not hijra. I'm not hijra. And that they say that to announce that they are better off, or that they are in a way that puts hijra people down, in a way that puts other socio-cultural, socio-religious communities down. Also, now that more and more trans women are coming to the fore, we are doing a mistake at some level. We are ending up doing the same things that our privileged cis gay brothers have done to us. We're doing that unto our trans brothers. Because you won't see, I don't know if you've seen any, but you'll barely see the female to male transitioning transgender people. When anybody talks about transgender people, the first thing that comes to their mind is a trans woman, not really a trans man or a trans boy. So what we have resented, we are knowingly or unknowingly extending it to our trans brothers, and we need to be extremely careful about that. Now, I should have written that down. You made a mention about, I forgot, I'm so sorry, I should have written that down. How much more time do I have? So, yes, with the NDA Sarkar that has come to power, there is the saffronization of transgender people happening at a large scale. You all know my friend Lakshmi Tripathi? Some of you would know. And she's a good friend, she's done excellent work. There's no taking that away from her. Until 4 years ago, my friend Lakshmi Tripathi was very left of center, located, her politics were either centrist or slightly to the left of center. Now she's constrained, and I'm not judging her on this at a personal level at all, but she's constrained to declare herself Sadhvi Lakshmi Tripathi, sitting on a buffalo at Ujjain Kumbh Mela, with her hair let loose, with a trishul in hand, and lots of vermilion and vibhuti and saffron. But she's constrained to do this because she needs to speak this language of the Sangh Parivar. And unless somebody does this, the NDA government will not even give us a backward glance. I'm sorry, I can't do this. I can't do this, and many of us won't be able to do this. And we are very publicly, I don't call myself a communist, but I publicly locate myself to the left of center. So it's very difficult for me to do this, it's impossible. And I'm sad to see that to at least start a dialogue with the government of India, people have to declare themselves as Sadhvi Lakshmi Tripathi to start the dialogue. So this is happening, mass, and it's now very unfashionable, or it's considered bad to be hijra, because hijra is a Persian word, it's an Islamic word. So call yourself Kinnar, which is a Hindu word. So hordes and hordes of our hijra people have begun calling themselves Kinnar, because that's good in the Sangh Parivar. Yeah, and now we've started the, the Kinnar Akhada in Ujjain. And we've all begun wearing saffron. And I'm not judging these people who are doing it. At a personal level, I'm not. But I'm definitely judging the conditions that have constrained them to find this as the only way of engagement with the government of India. And clearly it has come as a mandate from the government of India that unless you do this, we won't even give you a backward glance. So, and for those who are refusing to do this, find it even more difficult to engage with the government of India. Maybe some small successes, low-hanging fruits that we've been able to do with state governments, but thankfully there are yet some state governments that are, but that's fast changing. More and more state governments are now either part of the NDA government or BJP themselves. So I wanted to touch upon the saffronization of the transgender community. It's happening in a very quiet way because you may not notice it, but it's happening. You just Google the Kinnar Akhadas. You just Google you Google about my friend Lakshmi Tripathi. She's doing very good work, but she's constrained to do it as Sadhvi Lakshmi Tripathi. And she can't have the freedom to say that I'm constrained to do this. She can't. So, and I'm just thinking, just give me 5-10 seconds to think if I've forgotten anything else. So, there are many of us in the transgender community. The hijra community is largely Muslim. The Havelis that were given away by Quli Qutub Shah 300-400 years ago are very Muslim. They're very matrilineal. They follow, I have not done enough serious reading about it, barring Professor, the book with respect to sex by Professor Gayatri Reddy and Serena Nanda's book, which were quoted in the Supreme Court judgment of NALSAR versus Union of India. The hijra communes have been very Sufi Islamic, very fairly fairly good spaces at many levels. I'm not saying they're the best, because within these, see, how does Sangh Parivar find spaces to stand in transgender spaces? Because some of our communities, like how any community will have its own share of filth and rot, be it men or women or people with disabilities. We have our share of filth and rot, but you cannot oversimplify by making it a generalization. So even within the Hijra, Haveli Hijra communes, there's a lot of patriarchy. So they operate as Kap Panchayats, they give fatwas and so on. So that has been over-problematized to say that now you need to liberate yourself out of these regressive Hijra communes. Yes, there are problems with it, and we need to engage with our Hijra elders for the change to happen, but we don't want to disown our Hijra elders and push them in that enticement clause of begging and send them to jails for 2 years. Because when my father threw me out of the house when my elder brother threw me out of the house, I was 15. I just wrote, I haven't stepped into a college till date. My education was good in a school, so I speak English the way I do. But after 10th, after 12th, and my undergrad was all through IGNU. And when I was thrown out of my home when I was 15 years old, who were those who offered me refuge? The Hijra matrilineal communes. And this bill wants to decimate. I don't want to call this bill the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Bill. I think it should be actually called the Transgender Persons Decimation of Rights Bill 2016. And you are law students. Some of you would be, I don't know, some of you could be big human rights lawyers ahead. And I don't know, out of this room 10, 15, 20 years later, there could be a few judges of the High Court and the Supreme Court coming out of it. So what I'm trying to tell you is, we are not a unitarian community. We are very diverse, but our diversity and the problems within the community need not be oversimplified to destroy our systems. We are a very beautiful matrilineal system. The fact that Sonia is here, she's just stepped out because she had her pain in the ear. Sonia is, and those are Sonia's nieces. Sonia is an acid attack, gang rape, acid attack survivor from a Muslim family, a very working class Muslim family. She was gang raped because she said no to a stranger who showed interest in her. And the guy who did that to her called a bunch of friends, and when they did it, they said, "Hijri kahni ki, मर्द होकर हमने तरस खा के तुझसे इश्क लड़ाया और तू हमें ना बोलती है हिजड़ी कहीं की." And he did that. He gang raped her, and after that he poured almost a bucket of acid on her face, on her neck, on her torso. Sonia is a working class Muslim woman. Despite Lakshmi versus Union of India, Parivartan Kendra versus Union of India, Ravada Shashikala versus Union, time and again the Supreme Court has said that the minimum compensation of 3 lakhs has to be paid, and it created those line items. One, the entire series of acid attack surgeries of survivors must be free. No hospital must slap a bill on the acid attack survivor. Despite that, private hospitals, because bulk of those people who are attacked out of acid are all women. You go to any burns ward, any acid attack survivors burns ward, 99% of them are women. And private hospitals know very well that many women don't know that there are these Supreme Court judgments. You just slap a bill. A bill was slapped onto Sonia of 4 lakhs. And the GO9 of the state of Ghana says these 3 judgments that I just spoke about say minimum compensation of 3 lakhs. Minimum is minimum, no? GO9 says up to 3 lakhs. So you very beautifully said that it's the maximum compensation, and GO9 has a table, it has a hierarchy. If you're dead after acid attack, you get 3 lakhs. If you're alive and if you are over 40 years, it's not 3 lakhs, it's some 1.5 lakhs or something. So there's a table. And if you are over 40 years and you have less than 50% of burns, you get 25,000. That's the lowest. So minimum compensation set by Supreme Court in 3 different public interest litigations as 3 lakhs has now been circumvented and subverted and happily reduced to 25,000. Where is 25,000? Where is 3 lakhs? And Sonia, she's got a bad ear pain, she stepped out, but is a heroic woman of multiple marginalizations. She's a working class Muslim woman whose father died. She has some 6 sisters, unmarried, a mother who works at a madrasa, who lives on poverty and subsistence wages of 2,000 rupees a month. And when this happened to her, it took 2 years to even get the minimum compensation. It didn't come until 2 months ago. We all helped her file a writ in the High Court, which will eventually come now. The High Court, if you've been reading, it said that the transgender acid attack survivor must be given the first installment of the minimum compensation of 3 lakhs, the first installment. The court said first installment, and it directed the collectorate and the state government to say that we will decide. Justice the acting Chief Justice Ramesh Ranganathan and Justice Rajani said that the court will later decide on what the balance of compensation is. Despite this, you have private hospitals today like Apollo. Apollo slapped a quotation on Sonia of 4 lakhs as one surgery. And when we gave that complaint to the District Legal Services Authority, they just sent a customary letter, and later, when we complained further, escalated to the State Legal Services Authority. Apollo said, come, we'll do it free for you, and you'll get it done through the same surgeon. The same surgeon against whom we complain. How are we supposed to be sure that he will do a good job? He could be spiteful and vindictive that we dragged him to court. So despite this, because working class people, working class transgender people, working class Muslim women, working class women, working class acid attack survivors do not know, private hospitals are yet slapping bills on them. And minimum compensation of 3 lakhs is being told as maximum compensation in 25. Bas 25,000 de liyo, haath dho liyo. Ye ho raha hai. So I want you to be aware of all this so that you can test the legality and the constitutionality of these horrible GOs so that they get struck down in courts of law, because this is a very prestigious law school, and I'm very hopeful that many of you will be very capable and promising, competent lawyers, and perhaps human rights lawyers as well. Thank you.
Speak on specific to minorityism and how you see what is emancipation in those terms.
I want to recite this particular nazm from Kishwar Nahid's collection. She has written it long back, decades back, and it is yet not, happening in India. That is why I want to recite it to you all. The unwan is, the title is Hum Gunahgar Aurtein. ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं जो अहले जुब्बा की तमकनत से न रोक खाएं, न जान बचाएं, न सर झुकाएं, न हाथ जोड़ें। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं कि जिनके जिस्मों की फसल बेचें जो लोग, वो सरफराज ठहरे, नाबते इम्तियाज ठहरे, वो दावरे अहले सास ठहरे। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं कि सच का परचम उठा के निकले तो झूठ, जैसे कि जो सच का परचम उठा के निकले तो झूठ से शाहराहें अटी मिले। हर एक दहलीज पे सजाओं की दास्तानें लिखी रखी मिले हैं। जो बोल सकती थी वो ज़बानें कटी मिले हैं। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं कि अब ताक़ुब में रात भी आए तो ये आँखें नहीं बुझेंगी। अब ताक़ुब में रात भी आए तो ये आँखें नहीं बुझेंगी कि अब जो दीवार गिर चुकी है उसे उठाने की जिद ना करो। ये जो अब दीवार गिर चुकी है उसे उठाने की जिद न करना कि हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं जो अहले जुब्बा की तमकनत से न राब खाएं, न जान बचाएं, न सर झुकाएं, न हाथ जोड़ें. So this was written by Kishwar Nahid like almost 3 decades back, and it was possible only in Pakistan. At that Pakistan that was ruled by an Islamist dictator, Ziaul Haq. Even in those times she could muster up the courage to do this. In India, Muslim women are still, asking for a very small, they are so servile, they are so, domesticated, they are still asking for a very small concession. The concession of not exercise the right to to divorce unilaterally without informing or without even pronouncing it before her. It can be sent through SMS, it can be sent through various means of telegram or telecommunication. So this is something very, very important that we have to understand in this 21st century, second decade. We are still struggling with these issues because of the this psyche that we have, we are burdened with of being minority. In terms of number, we are not any less than men. So men are not dominant gender as such, but they are the hegemonizing gender. औरतें उतनी ही तादाद में जितने मर्द हैं within the Muslim community. तो democracy में number matters. And we can very effectively set the agenda for ourselves, because we can come up as a vote bank also. But because of this hegemonizing of patriarchy, we haven't been able to, come up or come together as a vote bank. And once we become vote bank, the political formations automatically will come towards and start, taking our concerns into account and putting them on election manifestos. तो माइनॉरिटीज इन या अल्पसंख्यकवाद का जो सवाल है वो इसलिए ही यहीं पर आकर के बहुत अहम हो जाता है कि संख्या हमारी उतनी ही भारी है. उस संख्या भारी होने के बावजूद हम क्यों सफ़र कर रहे हैं. तो वो बात समझने की है कि जहाँ जहाँ इस्लामिक हुकूमत है, including Iran, including Egypt and Saudi Arab and Pakistan and Bangladesh, Tunisia, Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, all these countries have far more emancipatory laws for Muslim women. And the so-called, the largest democracy of the world and liberal secular constitution and everything hasn't helped Muslim women much, because जो मौलाना का जो फ्रीडम है उसको ये सब कुछ छू नहीं पाया है. डेमोक्रेटिक जो भी प्रोसेस है, जो भी डेमोक्रेसी के जमहूरियत के तकाजे हैं, उनसे बहुत आराम से मौलाना ने अपने आप को बचा के रख लिया है. तो उस वजह से मौलाना को कोई छू नहीं सकता, मौलाना को छूने की हिम्मत नहीं करता. इवन एजुकेटेड एंड डिसेंट मुस्लिम मैन, they have come together with Muslim women now this time in a very good number, and I'm really happy that this number is not small, but still government hasn't been able to form a body of these decent educated urban Muslim men to speak to. Government is again and again going back to Muslim Personal Law Board only when it comes to the issues of Muslim personal women suffering from the particular interpretations of Muslim Personal Law. तो ये जो चक्रव्यूह है कि जो मेरा, अगर उसको मेटाफोरिकली कहें, जो मेरा कातिल है मुझे उसी से अपनी जान बचाने के लिए उसी के पास वापस भेज दिया जाए, तो ये होगा कैसे. इसके लिए पूरी सिविल सोसाइटी को, नॉट ओनली मुस्लिम्स बट द लार्जर सिविल सोसाइटी शुड आल्सो कम फॉरवर्ड एंड एटलीस्ट मेक गवर्नमेंट्स अंडरस्टैंड दैट you don't have to go to this NGO that is a kind of a khap panchayat of Muslim men, and where it is not even elected, nor neither nominated, nor there is no process of by which the members of the Muslim Personal Law Board are elected or selected or nominated, we understand. And the representation of other categories are just not there or hardly there. Their wives, their daughters, their daughter-in-laws who have some degree are and forget about thinking of other genders within that framework. So it is a highly unrepresentative body, and we simply do not expect any good coming out of it. So this is the major issue. The Muslim Personal Law Board is like a firewall in between the constitutional rights and guarantees and Muslim women. So this is what I meant when I said about minorityism that has crept into the Muslim community in India.
We can open up the discussion for the audience if any of you have any questions.
Good evening, Vyjayanti ma'am, and Assalamu alaikum, Sheeba ma'am. So I have a question for both panelists. My question to for Vyjayanti is not related to the talk per se. So Vyjayanti, last year I had an interview with you regarding the role of caste in transgender politics. So I had a doubt regarding that. I feel that class and transgender rights do have a connection, but I still can't understand how caste is related to transgender and sexual orientation rights are related to such a issue. And my question for Sheeba ma'am is, why is that Indian Muslim women largely remain isolated from the political mainstream? And why have they failed to form a political unified voice? For example, in 2016, when the Kerala Legislative Assembly elections were there, the IUML party, the Muslim League party, it openly declared that it won't give any seats to, it won't field any Muslim women candidates. But still there was no opposition from the Muslim women at large. So why is this phenomenon with regards to India? The second question is, you said that in India, Muslim women are not really form organizations. So fairly recently at the BMMA, the Bharati Muslim Mahila Andolan, so they carried out a survey and they found that majority of Indian women, Muslim women, they oppose uniform civil code, but they don't favor the abrogation they don't support the abrogation of the Muslim personal laws. So I don't understand, is this a kind of irony that on one hand they don't support the Muslim laws completely, but at the same hand they don't want the uniform civil code as well. And my third question is, you said that countries such as Iran and Saudi Arabia have more emancipatory laws with regards to women. So I didn't understand that statement. So if you could clarify on that. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
If you could just identify yourselves when you're asking the question, and if you can keep the questions short, that would be great. Thanks.
Shujab Bhatt, second year. Thank you.
Start. Your question on caste, class, and gender identity and sexual orientation. Within the socio-cultural, socio-religious transgender communities, I have not seen much caste within the communities. But when the transgender, the working class transgender communities interact with the society outside, that's where they face caste. I'll give you an example. I told you transgender is an umbrella term. There are Hijra, Kinnar, Mangalmukhi, Jogta, Jogi, Jogta, Jogappa, Aravani, so many Aravanis in Tamil Nadu, Tirungai, Tamil Nadu, Jogappa, Jogta, Karnataka, Shiv Shakti and Hijra, Telangana, and so on. Now, at a consultation 1.5 years ago, 1.25 years ago, when we met different socio-cultural, socio-religious transgender community members came, and we were debating on the bill. So a very poor working class person with disability, a transgender person with disability, Jogta. Jogta is a socio-cultural identity of transgender people who seek alms, or what is it called? They are ज्योतिष बताते हैं मंदिरों के आसपास. तो वो उन्होंने कहा कि ये इतना सारा डिबेट कर रहे हो बिल के ऊपर, जब हमारा रोजगार है आर्म्स लेना, सीकिंग आर्म्स एंड टू ज्योतिष बताना, और मैं एक दलित औरत हूँ, हिजरा औरत हूँ, जोगप्पा हूँ, और मैं जब वहाँ मंदिर जाती हूँ तो वहाँ का पुजारी मुझे हकाल रहा है. इस बिल में क्या प्रावधान है ताकि वो लोग मुझे मंदिर से ना हकालें? So, and we were all a bunch of, very Ambedkarite, agnostic or atheist, transgender, privileged, some level of privilege. No, I have to talk in English here. So, and then we felt, oh my God, we thought we don't have caste in the transgender community, but her livelihood is, the deprivation is happening in caste. She's called Apahij, Hijra, Chamar, and she's thrown. Chamar, Chinal कह के उसे आप समझ रहे हो ना? So she's a person with disability, she's a transgender person, and she's a Dalit person. एंड उसे चमार चिनाल कहकर हकाल दिया गया. एक और यहाँ सुरारम कॉलोनी केस था जहाँ, see, I haven't seen instances where transgender people have oppressed transgender people on caste, because बहुत सारे, I've barely seen that. There could be some very few instances which are minimal. Like I've heard people say, I'm a transgender Christian, but you know, मेरे माँ बाप वो रेड्डी कम्युनिटी के हैं, ऐसे बोलते हैं. पर वो पूछा जाए तभी बोलते हैं, लेकिन हर कोई बोलता है बेटा हिजड़ा बनने के बाद न मजहब है न जात है. तो but this caste comes when the person who, you know, a person dependent on alms, a hijra girl, went to seek alms from a Marwadi Seth. So the practice is to put, because people don't give often, they put a 5 rupee coin like that on the desk, and they expect a 10 rupee note back. So she put a 5 rupee coin. And that guy, because they don't go to the same shopkeeper every week or every fortnight, they keep changing, but they keep going at least once a month to the same shopkeeper. So that guy knew her, and he was not the good shopkeeper, but his brother, somebody who was a bad-tempered guy who was there, and he said, "Chal hat, chamar chinal kahin ki, haan, ungli mat laga." He didn't want her to touch. And this is a girl from a Konda Koya AP community. She barely speaks Hindi. She doesn't know Hindi. So she doesn't know what chamar means. She doesn't know what chinal means. So, and later he thrashed her. He first used a slew of expletives for her. She knew he was using, you don't really need to know the language, no? Through the body language you can make out. And then he started hitting her. So, and then all the shopkeepers came and they started hitting that hijra woman, and then we didn't know how to deal with this because Nirbhaya won't protect trans women. Very few, barely any occasions when we've accessed Nirbhaya. So then when later, 5 days later after we wrote the complaint, she said, asked me in Telugu, "Akka, chamar chinal ante endi?" In Telugu she asked me. I said, "Why are you asking?" वो उसे मारवाड़ी सेठ ने कहा, उसे पता नहीं चमार चिनाल का मतलब क्या है. So that's when we figured out that, oh, she's been called Chamar Chinal, then we have to apply the Prevention of Atrocities Act against the Marwadi shopkeeper. So this is how it comes. I've barely seen it within the community, within the transgender community, barring those instances of, you know, my lived reality. I'm not telling you my lived reality is the ultimate reality, because, you know, I have only limited exposure, no? I've only heard it in ways where people who've become Christian, they said, we are Kapu Christians, we are Reddy Christians, and things like that. To orientation, I see a lot of caste here. Because see, the cis gay male spaces are far more privileged than the hijra working class spaces, because here the only two sources of livelihood are begging and sex work. But there are people like you who are in law schools, there are people in these schools, there are people in Wall Street giants of Goldman Sachs, Deloitte, and so on. And there I've seen my friend, who's a very good friend, and I say this with no malice, but with dissent, democratic dissent, Harish Iyer. He put a matrimonial ad. He said, "Caste no bar, but prefer Iyer, prefer Brahmin." So it is your caste-based preference for a future partner. So how do you say caste no bar but prefer? Right, so caste exists. And I have not been, apparently there's some app that gay men use, but I've studied it, I've never used it because I don't identify as gay. I'm trying to recollect. Grindr. You know, I was about to say Mixi, but it's Grindr. Yeah, and apparently with their help, I've taken screenshots. So there are names like, say, Nandan Gujjar. So, you know, with the last names itself, you announce your caste. And people prefer Gujjar, people prefer Marwadi, people prefer vegetarian. So there are preferences laid out on the profile. So it's there in a big way. I think the more disenfranchised, the more marginalized you are, the more poor you are, it unites people across caste and class. And the more privileged people are, they have more choices to exert these privileges. Section. So my limited view, and I'm not saying my view is the ultimate view or I'm totally correct, but from my lens of lived reality, I'll tell you that caste barely exists in the transgender community within transgender people, but it comes to play when transgender people interact with the society outside. And it's there in a bigger way, in a much bigger way, in the privileged cis gay male spaces. Patriarchy and casteism, classism, because I've seen profiles of, I'm incidentally the amma and Nasi of quite a few young gay boys. So they keep crying out to me saying that, you know, I went to this pub, that disco, whatever, and they said, people get rejected as suitors on English, the way, how well they speak in English, or the brand that they wear, Gucci or Versace or whatever. Thank God this has not creeped into the transgender community. Yet it has not creeped in, and I hope it remains that way.
Thank you.
When you talk about the lack of unified voice, Shujat, and why this mainstream is isolated and all those issues, I want to give you a little background about how it has been, you know, accomplished. How Muslim women has not come up as a unified voice. Actually, you know, when this law came about the minimum marriageable age, which community was the one which opposed this law? And said that our kids should be, you know, exempted from the protection of this law. It was Muslims only, the Muslim Personal Law Board, right? So you don't let them, you have no problem with the child marriage. You don't let them study and get into some, get some training and professionally qualified and you know, get some decent training for the future livelihood. And then which community is there that is asking that that was opposing the right to education? You remember who was opposing right to education in this country? Right to education was opposed by none other than Muslim Personal Law Board. So Muslim kids should not be, you know, the education is no priority. And when I say this, the worst sufferers are the girls. And which community requested the government to exempt to exempt kids from taking maths exams in 10th? It was Muslim community only, the Muslim Personal Law Board. When you have this kind of, you know, understanding of society where your kids do not need to learn maths, where the right to education should not be applicable to your kids, when the minimum Child Marriage Prevention Act should not be applicable to your own community, you know what kind of community you are creating? And when you have these women who are not well educated, not well trained, maybe married in childhood, and when these women are divorced, their understanding of their issues is that Allah उनका इम्तिहान ले रहा है. उनका जो पहला रिस्पॉन्स होता है कि अल्लाह उनका इम्तिहान ले रहा है और वो अभी सब्र करेंगी तो उनको उस दुनिया में इसका अज्र मिलेगा एंड ऑल दैट. और ऐसे लोग जब उनके बारे में हम बात करते तो वो इतना समझते भी नहीं है. कितनी मुसलमान औरतों ने सिग्नेचर कैंपेन में साथ दिया मौलानाओं का कि कोडिफिकेशन या ट्रिपल तलाक को ना रोका जाए. और सबसे ग्लेरिंग एग्जांपल है शाहबानो खुद, जिसने इतनी लंबी लड़ाई तो लड़ी, लेकिन जब फैसला आ गया और जब उसको मौलाना ने डराना शुरू किया तो उस बेचारी ने कहा कि मुझे ये फैसला मंजूर नहीं है, ये इस्लाम के, ये कुरान की स्पिरिट के खिलाफ है और मुझे ये नहीं चाहिए. 250 रुपये महीना एक 80 साल की बुजुर्ग औरत, उस बेचारी को इस तरह से डराया गया. तो जब हम लोग ये बात कहते हैं तो होता क्या है कि अनदर इशू इज कि मुसलमान औरतें पिक्चर देखने जाएं, फिल्म और मेले में जाएं, बाजार में जाएं, मौलाना को कोई परेशानी नहीं है. मुसलमान औरतें, भारत की मैं बात करें, भारत की मुसलमान औरतें मस्जिद जाने की बात करें तो मौलाना को सबसे ज़्यादा परेशानी हो जाती है. क्योंकि मस्जिद में जब मुसलमान औरतें अगर साथ में आने लगी और आकर के बैठ के आपस में बात करने लगी, दे विल बी एबल टू रियलाइज दैट वट एवर इज हैपनिंग टू देम इज नॉट इंडिविजुअल केसेस, दिस इज अ सिस्टेमिक ऑपरेशन दैट इज बीइंग perpetrated upon them, and therefore they may start thinking in terms of group identity, of oppressed group identity, and that is the most डेंजरस थिंग फॉर द मौलवी। वो ये मौलवी कभी नहीं चाहेगा कि मुसलमान औरत को ये पता चल जाए कि उसके साथ जो हो रहा है वो अल्लाह ने नहीं किया है, वो कुरान में नहीं किया है, ये तो पैट्रियार्की ने किया है और ये उनके अपने रीति रिवाजों ने किया है। और ये भी उनको पता चल जाएगा कि ये जो हो रहा है ट्रिपल तलाक और पॉलीगैमी जिस तरह से, ये सब जगह नहीं है, ये ईरान में नहीं हो सकता, ये सऊदी अरब में नहीं हो सकता, ये पाकिस्तान में भी नहीं हो सकता। तो सारी जगहों पर कानून बन गए। भारत के अंदर भी इट इज ओनली अमंग द मुस्लिम द सुन्नी फैक्शन दैट इज प्रैक्टिसिंग ट्रिपल तलाक. The Shia and the 5 other Asharite sects of Shia, Miman, Bohra, Khoja, Aga Khani, all these are not practicing triple talaq. The Shias are not practicing. Within Sunni Muslims also, Ahle Hadith are not practicing triple talaq. It is only within the Sunni sect, and because that is the dominant sect in terms of population, the picture emerges as if each and every Muslim is practicing triple talaq. तो ये जो आप जिस बात की बात कर रहे हैं कि क्यों कोई मुहाज नहीं बनता, क्यों कोई फ्रंट नहीं बनता, वो इसलिए नहीं बनता कि आइडेंटिटी लेवल पर भी बहुत फ्रेगमेंटेड है मामला। दूसरे ये कि घर से निकलने का कोई मौका नहीं है मुसलमान औरत के लिए जहाँ जाकर के वो एक यूनाइटेड आइडेंटिटी के तौर पे बैठे और बात करें। देयर इज नो स्ट्रक्चरल मैकेनिज्म अवेलेबल। मुस्लिम मैन जैसे जाकर के जुमे के खुतबे में जाके अपना पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा सेटिंग करते हैं और फिर मौलाना बुखारी कहते हैं कि फला पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को वोट दो, वो मुसलमान औरत का राइट नहीं है ना, क्योंकि शी इज नॉट अलाउड टू एंटर इनटू द मॉस्क। तो एंड यू नो दिस hegemons are very touchy about these issues, that the servile class should not get united. Once they get united, they will, you know, the तख्ता पलट हो जाएगा उसके बाद। तो वो नहीं होता है। बामा का जहाँ तक सवाल है, बामा अगर आपको पता होगा, बामा शुरुआत में when बामा they started with this demand of uniform civil code. Later on they modified their demands and started talking about codification, and I was part of that deliberation. Dr. Asghali, Ali engineer, he was alive at that time, and myself, and we have drafted this first draft of the codification, and it is ready to be given to the government, to the law commission or to the law ministry or whosoever is interested in that, but it seems nobody is interested. Government of India wants Muslim Personal Law Board to decide everything. तो जो कोडिफिकेशन का ड्राफ्ट है वो तैयार है। यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड के मुद्दे पर बिल्कुल आम राय है मुसलमानों के बीच में ये है, हम उससे डर नहीं रहे हैं, हम उससे भाग नहीं रहे हैं, प्लीज उसका ड्राफ्ट लाइए तो ताकि उसके ऊपर बात हो सके। तो बिना देखे ना हम अपोज करेंगे ना सपोर्ट करेंगे। दिस इज अवर स्टेटेड पोजिशन नाउ। आपने कहा कि ईरान और सऊदी अरेबिया, आई हैव बीन टू ईरान नंबर ऑफ टाइम्स एंड टू सऊदी अरेबिया एज वेल एंड प्लस अदर मुस्लिम कंट्रीज ऑल्सो। आपको पता है कि ईरान में मुसलमान मर्द तब तक शादी नहीं कर सकता जब तक उसका अपना मकान न हो, और जब तक, और अगर डिवोर्स होता है तो मकान उसे छोड़ना है, अपने आप ऑटोमेटिकली द हाउस इज ट्रांसफर्ड, द फ्लैट इज ट्रांसफर्ड टू द वाइफ। ईरान में मुस्लिम वुमेन को 5 सोर्सेस से इनहेरिटेंस मिलता है, मुस्लिम मैन को सिर्फ एक सोर्स से मिलता है। सेम इज हैपनिंग इन सऊदी अरेबिया। लैंड होल्डिंग हैज बिकम सो लॉपसाइडेड इन कंट्रीज लाइक ईरान दैट 60% ऑफ द लैंड होल्डिंग्स आर विद मुस्लिम वुमेन ओनली, बिकॉज उनको माँ के इनहेरिटेंस से मिलता है, बाप के इनहेरिटेंस से मिलता है, उनका अपना जो है वो हस्बैंड का बिल्कुल नहीं है। लाइक इट इज नॉट लाइक इंडियन लॉ कि अगर पति गरीब है और पत्नी के पास की तनख्वाह ज्यादा है तो जब तलाक होता है तो पत्नी को देना पड़ेगा। दिस इज द न्यू लॉ एज वी ऑल अंडरस्टैंड। लेकिन इस्लामिक लॉ ये नहीं कहता। इस्लामिक लॉ ये कहता है कि अगर बीवी महारानी भी है और पति बेचारा रिक्शा भी चला रहा है तो पति को ही देना है, पत्नी का वो कुछ नहीं ले सकता है। तो 5 सोर्सेस से मुसलमान औरतों को मिलता है। तो जहाँ पर कुरानिक लॉज का इम्प्लीमेंटेशन हो रहा है वहाँ मुस्लिम वुमेन आर बेटर ऑफ इन टर्म्स ऑफ मटीरियली इन टर्म। तो सऊदी अरब ईरान का केस बहुत बेहतर है हमसे, और हम भारत में तो कोई भी रिफॉर्म हुआ ही नहीं है। एंड सिर्फ इसलिए नहीं हुआ है कि क्लर्जी जो है वो ये कहती रही है सरकार से कि आप दूर रहिए, आपका मतलब नहीं है इस बारे में बात करने का, एंड दिस इज शरीयत लॉ। दे आर वेरी स्मार्टली इंटरचेंजेबली यूजिंग द टर्म्स फॉर मुस्लिम पर्सनल लॉ, दे आर यूजिंग द टर्म शरीयत लॉ, एंड शरीयत लॉ दे से इज डिवाइन, एंड देयरफॉर एनीथिंग डिवाइन कैन नॉट बी इंटरफेयर, ह्यूमन इंटरवेंशन इज नॉट अलाउड इन दैट। Whereas these same Maulanas have created n number of Sharia laws. I mean, they have interfered into its, and there is nothing like Sharia law. There is no one book of Sharia. There is one book that is divine, that is Quran, and Sharia law may come from there and may come from the local practices as well.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Hi, I'm Vidhi. My question is for you, ma'am. One contention that a lot of people have with the feminist movement, or more precisely the women's rights movement, is that they don't actively include trans women. One example would be the debate about not letting trans women use ladies' washroom, etc. What are your opinions on this?
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hello ma'am, my question is to you. So there are many queer theorists who don't agree on self-identification and voluntarism of transgender people. They don't agree to people self-identifying themselves as transgender. So, but I personally think that it should be the choice of the particular person to identify themselves as a transgender person or not. So what are your views on that?
Good evening. Ma'am, I have one question regarding Muslim Personal Law Board and Waqf Board who claim themselves as representative and causing the interest of the community. And my question is to see why none of the groups within the community or the sect have challenged their representative character or their legitimacy, and why the government keep focusing accepting their legitimacy and representative character and on what basis?
If you could just identify yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Sunil from my second year. Vyjayanti ma'am, this is a question to you. I've only heard you speaking twice, and I realized that it's a level of sensitization that I have missed, and I would have lacked if not for speeches like yours. So the question might not be related to the talk as such, but what has been the role of education institutions, or what space have academic institutions provided for transgender people, or have they found a voice in academic institutions and spaces like these? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Shweta. I'm in my third year. I actually had two questions for you, ma'am. Firstly, while I understand the judgments like the NALSAR judgment have been incredible in that they've they've provided a certain legal status to people who don't identify as cisgender, and while such judgments definitely, I see the benefit to them, how do you think just in the discourse of the gender spectrum, how do you think a third label, which is a third gender, so a categorization into male, female and third gender, stands in relation to the view that gender is largely a spectrum and hence cannot be boxed into things like male, female and transgender? And my second question is more specific to the Indian transgender movement and one facet of intersectionality within it, which is that I think classism particularly affords you a certain level of privilege within the transgender movement, and forgive my terminology or my assumptions here, but I would assume that the access to things like gender reassignment surgeries gives you a certain privilege in that you're able to pass off as a gender that you identify as, which people who can't afford these surgeries don't have. So given that classism has more of a role in the transgender movement than, let's say, things like casteism or sexism, how does the Indian transgender movement go around tackling this particular facet of intersectionality?
Yeah, this question is very interesting, that why governments are not doing anything, right? We have to understand that government is part of nation state, and nation state itself is a very, very patriarchal entity. We have to understand this. And governments are formed by political outfits. Who are these political outfits? These are the same political outfits, whether it is BJP or Congress. कांग्रेस का राहुल मुंह आपको पता है, बीजेपी आपको बताती है हिंदू औरतों को 10 बच्चे पैदा करने चाहिए, लालू यादव और मुलायम सिंह का पुत्र प्रेम हम सब जानते हैं. All these outfits are highly patriarchal. इनसे 33% रिजर्वेशन पर तो हो नहीं रहा इनसे साइन, तो ये क्या करेंगे? But we have to understand one thing, that as a society also we are very sensitive towards crimes against sex. Like हर आदमी इसके खिलाफ है कि अगर किसी लड़की का सड़क पर बलात्कार हो जाए या उससे छेड़छाड़ हो जाए तो उसी समय छेड़छाड़ करने वालों को पीट के खत्म कर दो, उसका लिंच कर दो. इसके लिए हमारी सोसाइटी और अनजान लोग भी आकर के पीटने लगते हैं. ठीक है, तो हम क्राइम्स अगेंस्ट सेक्स जो है वो उसके लिए तो हम बड़े सेंसिटिव हैं, लेकिन क्राइम्स अगेंस्ट जेंडर के मामले में हम बिल्कुल पीछे हैं. वही आदमी जो अपनी बहन के बलात्कारी की जान लेने के लिए खड़ा हो जाएगा, वही भाई अपनी बहन को अपने पिता की जायदाद में हिस्सा नहीं देगा, है ना? यही है ना, वो कहेगा हमारी बहन बड़ी अच्छी है, उसको नहीं चाहिए है, वो बेचारी वो तो बहुत अच्छी है, हमारे रिश्ते बड़े अच्छे. अरे भाई तुम भी तो बड़े अच्छे हो, दे दो उसको उसका हिस्सा, कानून भी कहता है, तो वो नहीं देगा. मैं जेंडर ट्रेनर हूँ, मैं IPS ऑफिसर्स, BSF, CRPF, CISF इन सब से बात करती हूँ जाके, जब उनको ट्रेन करती हूँ तो उनसे पूछती हूँ कि आप में से कितने ऐसे हैं जिनके सामने अगर बलात्कार हो जाए किसी अपने का तो आपसे बर्दाश्त नहीं होगा. तो सब कहते हैं कि किसी अपने का क्या, किसी अनजान का होगा तो हमसे बर्दाश्त नहीं होगा, हम तो अभी खत्म कर देंगे उसको. तो मैं कहती हूँ फिर ये बताइए कि अगर इट इज क्राइम अगेंस्ट सेक्स, अगर इतनी ही कोई बात है, औरतों के साथ ये अपराध नहीं होना चाहिए, तो क्राइम अगेंस्ट जेंडर क्यों आपको बर्दाश्त है? नहीं हमें भी वो बर्दाश्त नहीं. अच्छा तो फिर पूछो उनसे कि आपने अपनी बहन को जायदाद में हिस्सा दिया है, तो वो फौरन कहेंगे नहीं हमारी बहन तो बहुत अच्छी है, उसकी तो शादी हो गई है. तो मैंने आप भी तो बड़े अच्छे हैं, तो आपके अच्छे भाई नहीं, आप दे दीजिए. तो वो कहते हैं कि नहीं उसकी शादी दूर हो गई है. तो मैंने कहा आपका गांव कहाँ है? आप हरियाणा के हैं और आप यहाँ कलकत्ता में ड्यूटी कर रहे हैं, तो आप भी तो दूर हैं, तो आपकी जायदाद और आपकी खेती बाड़ी कोई संभाल रहा है ना, तो वो भी कर लेगी इसी तरह से दूर बैठ के. तो वो कहते हैं नहीं वो उसको तो पति क्या मिल जाएगा. मैंने कहा पति को आपने दहेज दिया था? पहले हमने तो जो हो सकता था दिया था. तो भैया जो आदमी दहेज के लालच में लेके गया था आपकी बहन को, वो उस कागज लिखवाएगा, जायदाद लिखवाएगा अपनी? तो जो सगा भाई, एक माँ का पैदा भाई जब नहीं दे रहा है, तो जो जायदाद, जो दहेज की रकम तय करके गया था और उसको गाड़ी चाहिए थी, उसको ब्रांड चाहिए था, वो पट्टा लिखवाएगा. अच्छा वो लिखवाएगा भी तो क्या वो अपनी जरूरत के हिसाब से उसकी दुकान या उसका मकान बेच सकती है क्या वो बहन? नहीं, ऐसे तो हमारे रिश्ते खराब हो जाएंगे. रिश्ते कौन खराब करेगा? हम तो घर में नहीं आने देंगे. तो फिर आप कहिए ना कि आप अच्छे नहीं हैं. फिर वो बोलता है जस्ट मिनट, इसी से मैं बता रही हूँ कि क्राइम अगेंस्ट जेंडर गो अननोटिस्ड. फिर वो कहता है एक ही तो मकान है, हम उसमें रहते हैं, तो 2 भाई हैं 2 बहनें कैसे? तो 2 भाई तो एक मकान में रह रहते हैं. अगर एक ही मकान और 3 भाई हैं तो वो एक मकान 3 भाइयों में बच जाता है, आराम से बढ़ जाता है. लेकिन अगर एक बहन भी उसमें शामिल हो, बहन को बाहर कर दिया जाता है कि एक ही तो मकान है, कैसे दे? तो ये जो माइंडसेट है ना, इसको चेंज करने की जरूरत है. क्राइम्स अगेंस्ट जेंडर, तो इसी की वजह से जो सरकारें, जो पार्लियामेंट 33% पे अटकी हुई है, उससे आप बिल्कुल उम्मीद मत कीजिए. इट इज ओनली अपॉन the civil society, the educated Muslim male, the educated Hindu male, the decent people of this country, we all have to come together and put our weight around these issues, and then only it will be get done, and we are trying to do that only.
Thank you.
The first question that I had was on feminists and women not including transgender women into women's bathrooms, washrooms. Oh, I forgot your name. Riddhi. This has been a global debate. It's not come up so much to the fore in India as much it's been going on in the US. Again, it's conflating, it's happening at many levels. One is conflating transgender people with intersex, or it says that only those who have undergone surgery should, and not those who haven't, or even those who have undergone surgery, they are not women, right? So in each of this, I don't know if feminists are doing it in such large numbers, but yeah, women at some level. I think it's a question of ignorance. And the way to deal with it is to engage. You are lawyers, so you will know what principle of lawyers to be. You will know that in the presumption that crime will happen or something will go wrong is not adequate to deny a that is rightfully his, hers or theirs for a crime that hasn't happened yet. So I think it's a question of engagement and critical engagement with such people who oppose it, and with time that will get addressed. Now coming to the other question on queer theorists against self-identification, I forgot your name, sir. And I want to know, are those queer theorists transgender people? Yeah. So I am very amazed that if non-transgender people decide on how transgender people should identify themselves, and it's precisely what I call politics of behaviorism. You have no real lived reality of what it is to be transgender, and you will decide, like how within the feminist discourse, Savarna feminists will decide on behalf of Dalit feminists, and Savarna and Dalit feminists will decide on behalf of women who are dependent on sex work, and they'll talk about how sex work should be banned or legalized and so on. And here there are women dependent on sex work saying, hey, we are the ones who are dependent on sex work, ask us. So, for me, and the international jurisprudence on this, which is benchmarked, is that the person who is transgender will have a lived reality of what it is to be gender dysphoric and transgender. Many of us are not against clinical psychologists, because we need to, gender dysphoria can be evaluated by clinical psychologists and psychiatrists. But we are totally against pathologization of gender dysphoria, because earlier it was called gender identity disorder. And the World Health Organization only recently initiated the change, and it got depathologized from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria. So we're not against clinical psychologist evaluation, we're not against psychiatrists, because it could be also possible that a person who identifies as transgender could also be suffering from some other psychiatric ailment and may not necessarily be transgender. So rule that out. We're totally okay with psychologists and psychiatrists, but not with chief medical officers who are not necessarily psychologists or psychiatrists, who will eventually tell us to denude ourselves and grow up our genitals. That we're not at all okay with. And the principle of self-identification to me is paramount. I will decide whether or not I'm transgender, and so will you, and so will you, or so will you, or each one of us. Now the next question, still educational institutions on transgender people. Where are transgender people in educational institutions? Have you seen us? You haven't. So you get your answer, but you don't even have an entry. Very recently, about 1.5 years ago, 2 years after the NALSAR judgment, a little less than 2 years, the Telangana Public Service Commission said now it's male, female, and other. So people have just, some of them have changed their forms. I had a talk at ISB, seminar, where it's about LGBT inclusion, and they told me to invite lots of transgender people. And at the gate, they couldn't get entry because, our ID cards, despite we applying with the state government or with the Commissioner to Printing and Stationery for the Gazette notification, bulk of the state governments have not published those ID cards because bulk of the state governments are sitting pretty on the NALSAR judgment, are technically in contempt of the Supreme Court's NALSAR judgment. So bulk of the transgender community does not have ID cards, which is not our fault, because our responsibility is to self-identify, our responsibility is to declare. We are not the state government ourselves to print our own ID cards, right? So ISB wanted to do a workshop, an Indian School of Business, even more privileged than your school, no? It's a epicenter of capitalism. So, and it's a workshop in transgender inclusion, and transgender people are waiting outside, unable to get in. So you've not done your homework as what it needs to, your due diligence and what it needs to get transgender people in. And they went on and on about how inclusive they are and blah, blah, blah. So I very quickly went to the ISB website where the GMAT forms and all that, where you have to apply. And we projected on the projector and I said, where do you see the option there apart from male and female? And we'll sit and argue here that we're very inclusive till cows come home. So many, I haven't been to schools, but colleges and educational institutions, the first thing is to just put that small change of including transgender. That hasn't happened. But even if that happens, How do you expect people who not have basic education? It's like, I'm giving you a flat on the 40th floor, and that's yours, but there is no staircase, no lift. So just look at it and feel happy. So to be eligible to apply for the Public Service Commission, I need some access to education, I need some access to college. That's now very slowly happening. Even 1 month ago said all transgender people will have free, no fee to be charged to transgender people. That's happening very slowly. It's begun with IGNO, it's begun at a few places. Now, the last question, which is classism, intersectionality, SRS, and Shweta, you asked it. Yeah, Shweta. So yes, sexual reassignment surgery, gender confirmation surgery requires a good one, requires at least 2 lakhs. The basic one, a good one. And both of the transgender community has not undergone sexual reassignment surgery. But don't call us men, because genetically, clinically, the bodies could genetically be male, but who said that we are reduced to just our bodies? I think we transcend our bodies, right? If we were just bodies, then our personhood would continue after our death, right? So, bulk of the transgender community has not undergone sexual reassignment surgery because there's investment involved, and I totally agree with you that only those, what's her name, I forgot, the American one who was, can you prompt me? I forgot her name. Yeah, Kathleen Jenner. So unless you're Kathleen Jenner, or unless you're somebody who's super privileged, you won't be acknowledged as a trans woman. That is pathetic. With or without surgery, our gender cannot be reduced to what lies between our thighs. It is between our heads, and it's in your heads. And we need to acknowledge that and respect that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for coming in. I do believe Sunday evenings are a difficult time for people on campus. Thank you to both of the panelists for coming in and participating in such a lively discussion.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you to Aymen, Sheeba and Vyjayanti ma'am. We'll have the theatre competition starting in like 10 odd minutes. If you'd like to go watch it in the auditorium, or if you'd like to take part. Thank you for coming.